Hello, Chelsea. Thanks for joining me. And we're about to go into Van Gogh letters. Uh, we are coming to the end of July, and so we are going to review the letters that he wrote in July. I want to share some photos that my graphic designer took of me and Timmy when we were in Cape Town. I'm actually waiting for a download to complete. I just want to make sure whether it has. It looks like it's not quite, looks like it's another 10 minutes before it's finished downloading. I wanted to test it out on this computer. On my other computer, it worked and then it didn't work. So I don't know what's going to happen. What I mean is, it's a video that comes off my GoPro. Beautiful video through the mists. And come on, come, 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 come on, come on. It's a beautiful video through the mists. And the first time I played it, played without a hitch. And Timmy says, hi, hello. And after I played it, it seemed to struggle. So I'm not sure if we're going to be able to do it. So in any event, while we're waiting for it to download, we are going to resume with the letters. Do you remember what happened in the last Van Gogh letters? We dealt with the news that Jo was pregnant, and Van Gogh's response to that. And we also quickly dealt with a letter that he wanted to write to Gauguin. Now, there doesn't seem to be a record of that letter. So he wrote a letter to Gauguin, but we don't have that letter. And also, one thing we do know is that Gauguin didn't respond. So the last time Van Gogh and Gauguin spoke to one another by letter was, I think it was late January, and then they wouldn't communicate again until November. So this letter was ignored by Gauguin, this letter that he wrote, and we don't have a record of it for some reason. Yeah, I have seen that there is a Lego Vincent. Okay, so yeah, we've still got 9 minutes to download. Let's continue. Robbie Robin, you're not late at all. I've also got some photos from New York of the, I think it's the Met and the Guggenheim, which I want to share with you guys as well. So we'll get to that in due course. So if we go to the letter, 6th of July, Vincent writes, Joe's letter told me a very great piece of news this morning. I congratulate you on it, and I'm very glad to hear it. Now, just a reminder, the art experts basically say that Van Gogh cut off his ear originally because he heard that Theo was getting engaged, and he thought that meant that Theo wouldn't be there for him anymore. And then the other theory is that Van Gogh killed himself because this is like a year or two later, because Van Gogh realized that Theo wouldn't be there for him anymore because Theo had just had a child. So if that's how he felt, he certainly doesn't say anything about it in his letter. You can, in a way, imagine that he might be concerned about it, but he certainly doesn't really refer to it here. And nothing changes. It's not like Theo gets married and Vincent says, okay, well, I guess I'm going to stop painting. He just doesn't stop, right? Nothing really changes. Bruni, good to see you. Mel Stiller. Maria, good to see you. Thanks a lot, Robbie Robin. And so this is where we are at this point. I think we actually covered this letter, but let's kind of just review some of it. He says, I was much touched by your thought when you said that neither of you, being in such good health as seems desirable on such an occasion, you felt a sort of doubt and in any case, that a feeling of pity for the child who is to come pass through your heart. Now, the reality is actually that they weren't in very good health. Uh, so Van Gogh is actually 100% accurate to say, wow, I'm actually surprised you're having a child because Theo's health's not so great. And let's face it, Theo would die 6 months after Van Gogh, right? Theo would die 6 months after Vincent. Basically, I won't say from the same thing, but the thing that is really causing Van Gogh to be in the asylum, in my opinion, syphilis and neurosyphilis, would cause Theo to be in an asylum a year and a half later. And bear in mind, these brothers are, what's the age difference between them? I think it's 3 or 4 years or something like that. Daria, good to see you. So Theo's health is a factor. Of course, Theo having syphilis meant that Jo could have syphilis as well. Certainly her health could be impacted, and her health was impacted. So we aren't only concerned about Vincent's health and mental health, but also Theo's health. There you see it over there. And Joe's. He says, I share your anxiety with all my heart. And of course, another thing that was happening at this point was that the youngest brother, Cor van Gogh, we often forget that there are 3 Van Gogh brothers, Vincent, Theo, and Cor. Cor is the youngest. Cor was about to go to South Africa. By the way, I'm not sure if I really like the title to this episode. So if you can think of a better title, if we come across words for a better title, let me know. Yeah, it was very common back then. And of course, at this time, antibiotics are only just coming online, as it were. They're only just starting to recognize that bacteria and bacterial infections are a thing. So, it's very much in its infancy. Other things are coming online as well: photography, engineering, electricity, the telephone, things like that. I just want to make sure, when was the telephone invented? The bicycle was about to be invented as well. Okay, so the telephone was invented in 1876. So around about this time, telephones are coming online, but it's going to take a while for them to become sort of mainstream, right? Okay, let's continue. Timmy, stop snoring. He says, I very much like to think that illness sometimes heals us. That is to say, when the discomfort comes to a crisis, it is necessary for the recovery of the body's normal condition. Of course, in a weird way, that is what Van Gogh is trying to do, right? He's trying to recover. Another thing that's just worth mentioning is it's a couple of weeks, literally a week or two, since he's painted Starry Night. And although you would imagine that there should be great fanfare, that he should be patting himself on the back, basically he paints it and life goes on and nothing really changes very much. He's actually just made a seminal achievement in terms of art history, right? Think about it. Regardless of what happens to that painting, when it happens and all that, he has executed one of the most valuable and memorable and important and meaningful and influential artworks in the history of art. But in terms of his own life, he paints it and life just goes on the next day like nothing has changed, right? So, let's go on to this letter. He says, in my life as a painter, and especially when I'm in the country, it is less difficult for me to be alone, because in the country you feel more easily the ties that unite us all. But in town, as he has been for 10 years on end with the Goupils in Paris, it is impossible to exist alone. So with patience, it will come back. Then he says here, I'm going to All tomorrow and to get canvases. And he's probably going to be doing one or two other things in All as well. Then he says, this morning I talked a little to the doctor. He told me exactly what I already thought, that I must wait a year before thinking myself cured, since the least little thing might bring on another attack. He says, I live soberly because I have a chance to. I drank in the past. There's a unusual admission from him. I drank in the past. I drank, what is that stuff called? Just can't think of the name. What's that substance that they drank? Guys, can you help me out here? It's not alcohol, although it's got a high amount of alcohol. Absinthe, thanks, Yvonne. That's the one. And absinthe is really, it's like very potent whiskey, right? And so he says, I did not quite know how to do otherwise, meaning I didn't know what to do if I didn't drink. Then he says, very deliberate sobriety leads nevertheless to a condition in which thoughts, if you have any, move more readily. In short, it is the difference like painting in gray or in colors. I'm going to paint more in gray, in fact. Oh, really? Don't think so. Instead of paying money to a landlord, you give it to the asylum. I don't see any difference. It's hardly any cheaper. The work is a thing apart and has always cost me a lot. Then he talks a bit about Shakespeare. He's reading Henry VIII, and he speaks about wanting to read Homer. Obviously, he can read it in English, so he can speak Dutch, French, English, and I think he could also speak German. Then he talks about outside the cicadas are singing fit to burst, a harsh screeching 10 times stronger than that of the crickets, and the scorched grass takes on lovely tones of old gold. The beautiful towns of the south are in the same state as our dead towns along the Seder Sea. Seder means south, Sea is sea. So that's basically talking about the South Sea. Yet in the decline and decadence of things, the cicadas, dear to the good Socrates, abide. And yes, certainly they still sing in ancient Greek. If our friend Isaacson heard them, it would certainly rejoice his heart. Sounds like he's saying the cicadas sing in ancient Greek, so got a bit of a sense of humor there. By the way, I'm in the process of preparing a trip to Greece and Italy and France. And so possibly in a couple of months, I might be doing a Van Gogh letters from the south of France. So that should certainly be quite cool, right? And then I can obviously also share some photos from France, from Saint-Remy. I mean, I've been to Saint-Remy, but I didn't really take too many photos. I was on a bicycle. I did take photos, just not that many. So I might be returning there quite soon. I might actually be seeing Bria. We're trying to sort of make arrangements, so we'll see how that pans out. So it should be quite exciting. Anyway, he's talking about Greece, and that's somewhere else that I'm likely to be going for the first time. I don't know, is there anyone here amongst you guys that have traveled in Greece and Italy? Because I'm just wondering whether one can hire a car. Should you rather go by car or by rail? And how expensive is it, kind of thing. Anyway, that's something we can maybe talk about later. Hey, can you stop snoring? Thanks. Okay, so he says, what Joe writes about you having all your meals at home is splendid. So, you know that saying, the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. Van Gogh can definitely appreciate the fact that his brother's getting his meals cooked for him. I can tell you uh, something kind of similar. When I used to visit my friend Alex in Johannesburg, um, uh, I would sometimes have dinner there, and it would be such tasty meals, and I would feel kind of a sense of envy and a sense of jealousy and a sense of appreciation that he comes home from work and his wife cooks these really good meals, not only tasty but healthy as well. And I remember thinking, wow, Alex, you've got a good thing going here. It's not just that you're getting your meals cooked for you, but that they are such healthy meals as well. I remember you would typically open a candy bar, Lindt chocolate, and we'd have a block of chocolate afterwards as well. Anyway, by the way, his wife has recently run the Comrades Marathon. I think like 80 or 90 kilometers, so it's quite exceptional what she's done. Um, Bruni says Italy is fabulous. I took an overnight sleeper train from Paris to Rome at a reasonable price. Well, my question is, can you take one from Rome to the south of France? I just don't know whether I've taken an overnight sleeper from Portugal to to Madrid, and it was terrible. It was like six of us in a compartment. We just like I couldn't sleep. There were a lot of snorers. I don't know if I would want to do that again. Oh, don't drive in Italy. Okay. So, what do you suggest? Taking the train to France. Do you think that that would work? Yvonne, I can't believe it. You've never been to Europe. You're going to have to make a plan. Hopefully, me going there is going to whet your appetite. Okay, so the end of the set, he says, altogether, I think it is all going very well. Now, imagine that you're in an asylum. Some of your freedom has been taken away. There are people around you that are screeching, that are just irritating, that are not very well. And look how resilient he says. All in all, I think it's going very well. He says, with all my heart, all possible uneasiness about Theo's health, with me, the hope predominates that in this case, a more or less sickly condition is only the result of nature's efforts to right herself. So at this point, he's still quite, what's the word, nonchalant about what's going on, right? And he basically says, I just need to be patient. Mauve always asserted that nature was good, and even more so than is generally believed. Was there anything in his life that proves he was wrong? The fits of depression during his last days, do you think? Now, I have to say, I don't like to, on this channel, I don't like to talk about the issues on the True Crime Rocket Science channel, because I feel like this is a channel for kind of positive subject matter, things like fitness and food and travel, and kind of fun things in a way. And Van Gogh Letters is kind of also ultimately a story of hope in a way, of being able to paint Starry Night despite um, having lost your ear, and despite being very lonely, and despite all these things, that you're capable of achieving incredible things that can change the world um, in a place of adversity. I also think Van Gogh is a wonderful example of someone who manages to cope with being very isolated, cope with feelings of incredible insignificance. I mean, he's all alone, he's trying to paint, no one understands what he's doing. And I think there are times where he does feel depressed. I think he feels um, a little or a lot invalidated by society around him. For goodness sake, he's just been kicked out of all. So he has real feelings of insignificance, but he doesn't allow it to get to him in the main. I mean, I'm sure there are times where it does get to him and then he maybe has a drink kind of thing. But his self-belief is so strong, his self-esteem ultimately so strong, his psychological resilience is so strong. So one of the ways to deal with being lonely, to deal with being isolated, to deal with feelings of insignificance is through a creative response, through building an archive of your own creativity, becoming a master of your own thoughts and capacities, and having a sense of passion about something that you care about. And in a way, it's okay if nobody else cares about it. In a way, if other people don't understand or misunderstand you or laugh at you or mock you, it's kind of okay, because if you see value in it, then that's something. And maybe ultimately there is value in it, and it turns out with Van Gogh there is, right? So just saying, the creative response is certainly one way of dealing with those feelings of insignificance. You're literally creating something out of nothing. Van Gogh was also creating himself. He was creating himself as an artist. He was creating artworks. He was creating a way of seeing the world, all of which is very, in a world that is cynical and what's the word? Very secular sometimes, very mechanical. Starry Night is magical and beautiful and kind of sensual and accessible, all those things. And that's a great gift that he gave to us via him going on this path that he allowed himself to go on, that Theo allowed him to go on as well. A path that's very rare these days, for someone to spend a lot of time and effort on something that doesn't really make any money. Where people nevertheless say, well, even though it's not making money, I see value in it. Even though it's not making money, I think it's meaningful. Even though it's not making money, I think it has a point. Even though it's not making money, it is important. All those things, right? And that is incredibly rare in today's society. It's not only rare, it's special. Um, are there ways to measure people and their efforts besides money, besides your number of followers? And Van Gogh is a good example of that, where you can say, I don't have any followers, or my only follower is my brother and his wife and one or two other people. But you know what? I believe in what I'm doing, and that's enough for me. Susan Smith, thanks a lot. Susan says, um, title ideas: Van Gogh quietly changes the world. Okay, that's not a bad one. Thanks a lot, Blue Flame. Okay, so let's continue with this letter. So he talks about the fits of depression that some other artist is having in his last days, and he says, I should be inclined to think otherwise. So basically saying, you need to be patient. You need to be patient. Nature can sometimes right herself, and you must also believe in yourself. And then he says, goodbye for the present. I wanted to write straight off and tell you how pleased I am with this morning's news. And then we go to the 6th of July, a letter to Theo. The reason I'm writing to you a second time today is that I'm closing a few words for our friend Gauguin. Now, as I say, that letter seems to have disappeared. I don't know where that letter is. I don't know what's in that letter. One thing we do know is Gauguin never responded. So one can only guess what is in that letter. He says, I felt my calm returning these last days. Now, you would imagine, tell me I'm wrong. You would imagine if the news of the pregnancy, if that was distressing to him, you would imagine that the last thing he would be feeling was calm. if the news of Theo becoming a dad was genuinely going to lead to this existential crisis where Van Gogh would be thinking, me, what's going to happen to me? I need money. My brother needs to give me money, and now he's not going to have money. What am I going to do? Me. But he's not that kind of person. It definitely is quite a humanist, right? And the other thing about Van Gogh that's interesting is where he is going through quite a bad time, and he's saying, I think I need to become a soldier. I think I need to join the Foreign Legion. And this is like early on in the whole decision to go to the asylum. I mean, Theo is saying, do you really want to go to the asylum? I mean, you're going to give up your freedom. You know, you could come to Paris. You could come stay with us. You could go to Marseille. You could do this. You could do that. And ultimately, he goes to the asylum. And then Theo says, you know what? If you just hang around there a while, maybe it'll work out for the best. But Theo also says, please, I don't want you to worry about money. I've actually been doing quite well this year. So the whole thing does come up. And Theo reassures him and he says, you know what? Your work means so much to me. Your work is so, the work that you're producing is payment enough for everything. You don't owe me anything, right? And so that would reassure Van Gogh, him saying that, right? So this whole thing that Vincent would be like, oh, I'm such a burden to my brother. I don't know what I'm going to do. Well, his own brother said to him, you're not a burden. And not in a disingenuous way. You kind of got the sense that it is something that he can handle. And that's, again, what the art experts just conveniently ignore, right? Deborah D, good to see you here. Okay, so he goes on to say, I feel calm. It seemed to me sufficient so that my letter would not turn out to be absolutely ridiculous. Besides, if you over-refine scruples of respect or sentiment, it is not certain that you gain in courtesy or common sense. That being so, it does one good to talk to the other fellows again, even at a distance. So it seems like he does want to talk to Gauguin. Now, I'm not sure whether you tell me, do you think these are the words to Gauguin or to Theo? Because he's talking about Paris over here, and there doesn't seem to be any change in this paragraph. But he says, and you, old man, how are things going? Write me a few lines one of these days, for I think that the emotions which must seize the future father. So this is definitely addressed to Theo. This is not part of the letter to Gauguin. He says, the emotions which must seize the future father of a family, the emotions which our good father so like to talk about, in your case as in his, must be great and fine, but are for the moment rather beyond your expressing in the rather incoherent medley of the petty vexations of Paris. Bear in mind, right now in Paris, it's the World Fair, and of course, Vincent is missing it. Every day that he's where he is, he's missing it. After all, realities of this kind must be like a good mistral, not very caressing but purifying. The mistral is obviously the wind in that part of France. I assure you, it is a great pleasure for me too, and will contribute much to relieving me of my mental fatigue and perhaps of my indifference. So this is how he diagnoses himself right now. He says, I'm suffering a bit from mental fatigue. Bear in mind, he's had a horrible time. He was kicked out of his home not that long ago. Have you ever experienced that? I've been kicked out of my home quite a few times. It happened once when I lived in London, or Maidenhead actually. But I've definitely been kicked out of my home a couple of times. I can tell you it is very draining. It's very discombobulating. It's very disconcerting. It's very depressing. It's very hard to deal with. It's very, you in a very uncertain place. And then he says, So that may relieve me of my mental fatigue and then also my indifference. Now, it's incredible that he's talking about indifference something like 2, 3 weeks after he's painted Starry Night. I mean, that's hardly an indifferent painting. That seems to be a painting that is just literally churning with feelings, churning with emotions, churning with meaning, churning with whatever is the opposite of indifference. What would you guys say is the opposite of indifference?
Indifference.
Indifference is a lack of interest, right? Apathy, a lack of inspiration. Starry Night definitely isn't a lack of inspiration. It's one of the most inspired paintings ever, right? Um, what is the opposite of indifference? Well, the opposite is brilliance, right? The opposite of indifference is brilliance. That's one version of it. Another one is to care, to care about something. So you might say indifference is almost like being careless or not caring, right? It's also, in a way, a lust for life, right? And by the way, a movie was made about Van Gogh called Lust for Life. Okay. And so he's literally saying, I'm struggling a little bit with indifference, right? And he says it is something, and you must bear in mind, part of that struggle, I think, is because he's sick. I think when you are not healthy, part of what's going on is your energy has been drained out of you. I think part of when you sick is um, kind of a kind of apathy, but that's not due to depression. That's due to illness. It's part of your body saying you need to calm down, you need to slow down, right? Okay, so he goes on to say, after all, it is something to get back one's interest in life. Now you must remember, and again, I wanna invoke this kid who did what he did, tried to shoot President Trump. Um, that was a kid who didn't have any interest in living, right? And so think about the opposite to that. Someone who's depressed, thinking about how do you get your interest back in life? How do you get your interest back in life? Well, one answer to that is time. Give it time. Be patient. Let nature's pendulum find its sort of. If the pendulum has swung one way, allow the pendulum to swing the other way. You can't necessarily force everything. And then he talks about when I think that I'm about to pass into the state of an uncle to this boy, planned by your wife, I find it very funny that she feels so sure it is a boy, but that remains to be seen. And so I think how he's getting an interest in life in a way is in a way voyeuristically, where he's thinking about his brother and he's thinking about his brother having a child and he's thinking about himself being an uncle and he's thinking about this new life coming into the world. And I think in that sense, he is in a way awakened to a rebirth in himself, perhaps, that maybe the old him can die and it's now time for renewal, whatever that is, right? Um, yeah. And of course, that's exactly what he's not going to do for a whole year. For a whole year, he's going to be going through the kind of paroxysms of um, withdrawal. He's going to be going through a long process of healing and recovery and kind of a roller coaster of downward spirals and upward spirals, right? And so it's going to take a long time for him to sort of deal with the situation he's in. And the hardest part, in a way, and in a way the most difficult part, and in a way the most dangerous part, is leaving the asylum. It's almost like if you put a bird into a cage, like a canary into a cage, and then one day you open the cage door. That is in a way the most dangerous part for that little bird, because it's not used to the rigors of the outside world. It's used to being fed. It's used to being protected by the bars of the cage. Now, as soon as you open the cage, well, now the bird can fly out, but it doesn't really know what to do. It's not really used to the outside world, and that can be a dangerous time, right? Karen Sanderson, hello to you in Wisconsin. Yvonne, I actually was looking at some explanations for why people are unhappy, and one reason is overthinking. So the whole analysis of true crime, if you do it absolutely constantly, you're not going to be happy. There's a certain amount of introspection that's good and analysis that's good, but then you need to stop, and then you need to stop and learn the lesson you've learned and go out into the world in it. But you can't just analyze endlessly, because you can, in a way, you can have infinite introspection. It just doesn't really take you anywhere in the end. Introspection is good up to a point, and then you need to go out again. And in a way, this is Van Gogh's introspective phase. So overthinking is a path to unhappiness. Another path to unhappiness is um, comparing yourself to others. So just think about it. If Van Gogh had just sat down and said, let's think about other artists that have sold their work. Gauguin, Monet, Cezanne. By the way, Cezanne is another contemporary of Van Gogh. Well, they're all doing better than I am. Oh, I'm such a loser. I'm just going to give up. That's a very good way, a very effective way to discourage yourself, is to compare yourself and your situation unfavorably to somebody else, because you can always do that, right? And that's something I must say I need to work on, because I do that quite a lot as well. You need to kind of say, whoa, um, I'm in this situation. These are my values. These are my priorities. Things are a little bit different for me because this is how I see things, and I have actually different values to some of these other people, and so I'm not going to. It's not really a fair comparison. Blah blah blah. Although it is quite difficult to not get caught up in that every now and then. But if you think about it, it's quite amazing that Van Gogh doesn't um, he isn't discouraged by that. You don't hear him griping about other artists. One does wonder whether Gauguin made him feel very insecure, because when Gauguin arrived in Arles, I think he like sold 3 paintings just like that, and I think it must have felt weird to sort of see an artist and he's doing what Van Gogh has been trying to do almost his entire life. And an artist sort of just steps over the threshold, and this guy's just selling his art. And he went on to sell other art. And make no mistake, Van Gogh is not better really than Gauguin. They're both absolute juggernauts in the art world. When you go to the Met, when you go to major art museums in the world, you see Gauguin's right there with Van Gogh. And there's a lot of Gauguin's art that I really like. In fact, I would say I prefer it to Van Gogh's art. I just don't really like the individual very much. But I'm just saying, one way that Van Gogh could have talked himself out of ever painting again is to say, look at this guy. He just painted one painting and he sold it. He painted another painting and he sold it. You know what? I give up. And he could have done that. He could have talked himself out of it. Absolutely. Aloha, Iceland. Good to see you. Okay, so and be in nature a lot. Nature's a really great place to um, find yourself, rediscover yourself, find proper senses of proportion in terms of oneself. I must say, there's a walk that I do with Timmy and there's a little area that feels a lot like Dagobah, the planet where Yoda lived. It's kind of swampy. There's a lot of big trees there, a lot of leaves on the ground. Every time I go there, it feels completely different. It's kind of like Monet's pond, and that's kind of a reminder that even a place in nature that is the same, it's the same trees, the same topography, the same setup, can feel like a totally different place based on the time of year, based on the seasons, based on where the sun is in the sky. And in a way, the same can apply to us. We can be the same person. We just need to sometimes change our perspective, and we can be completely um, effective in different ways just by, fine tuning our thoughts a little bit. Okay, shall we continue? Chelsea says, I go to the lake, very calming. Chelsea says, I don't like his art. Okay. Right, so let's continue. So he says, anyway, meanwhile, the only thing I can do is plod a little at my pictures. So he is saying, while I'm feeling kind of stuck, while I'm feeling mental fatigue, while I'm feeling kind of indifferent, what I'll try and do is plod a little at my pictures. Basically, I'll just try a little bit at this thing that I'm interested in, right? And then he says, I have one going of a moonrise over the same field as the sketching Gauguin's ladder, but in some stacks take the place of the wheat. In it, some stacks take the place of the wheat. It is dull yellow, ochre, and violet. Is that a moonrise? Evening landscape with rising moon. Wow, that is supposed to be the moon. Okay, I wouldn't have guessed. It's kind of got a somewhat, it's got a bit of a starry nightness about it, doesn't it? In a sense, like certainly that little piece. Let's see if we can find a better version than this. It just looks a bit garish. Definitely looks a bit garish. This is maybe a little bit better. This is from the Kröller-Müller Museum. I've actually been to this museum. There's a little bit of a better sense of the color scheme. But that is supposed to be the moon. I suppose it makes sense because there's no yellow around the sun. If this was the sun, you'd imagine it would have that sort of radiant thing going on. And so this is also quite an extraordinary picture in the sense that it's giving you a sense of liveliness, that even at night there's this energy in the world, right? So much for indifference. There's a little house over there. I must say, these mountains look like waves, don't they? And look how the wheat is sort of sleeping at night. The wheat is sort of this stagnant. That's actually the wrong word. The sort of idling energy. It's almost like the wheat. This wheat is like him. It's sort of something that has a lot of energy, but it is at night. It's something that is in a way. What's the word? I know what I'm trying to say. I'm just not quite sure how to say it. Almost like a sense of potential. There's kind of potential in this unharvested, this wheat that is lying outside at night, unharvested, right? Yeah. So it's quite a beautiful picture, isn't it? If you didn't know that that was the moon, would you guess that it was the moon? I don't know if I would. Okay, definitely a better version than this one, right? And so he says, you will see it in a short time. I'm also working on a new one with Ivy. Above all, old man, I beg you not to fret or be worried or unhappy about me. The idea that you might get into your head of this necessary and salutary quarantine would have little justification. And there he says, when we need a slow and patient recovery. So I don't think he's being disingenuous here. I think he realizes what he needs to be doing. He needs to recalibrate. He needs to slow down and recover. Jody, I don't think they knew about things like blood moon in that time, but I could be wrong. Maybe they did. Let's have a look. Maybe it actually does go back in time. So here's an article from the New York Post. Blood moons have a dark and ominous history. Let's see where signs, portents, omens. When does it start? Well, yeah, they refer to Babylonian omens. And we know that it does have some of its roots in Christianity. And his father was a pastor. Just don't really see anything here. For the Chinese, this demonic entity was a dragon. For the Vikings, it was sky wolves. Anyway, to the Egyptians, the life-giving sun was the god Amun-Ra. So maybe he did see a blood moon. Quite an interesting thought that. Here's another thing, lunar eclipse. Okay, so it looks like I'm not going to be able to read that. I'll just quickly show you guys again. Lunar eclipse myths from around the world. Okay. So anyway, let's continue. So he says, if we can manage that, we will save our strength for next winter. Yeah, I imagine the winter must be very dismal. So once again, if you, a young person or even an older person, and you are in a bad spot, you need to just slow down and be patient. Try and let nature assist you in terms of your recovery. And then he says, I must try to occupy myself all the same. Find something to do. Find something to do that you enjoy. He says, I often think that next winter might retouch a lot of last year's studies from Arles. So just lately, having kept back a big study of an orchid, which had given me great difficulty, it is the same orchid you will find a variant of, but very vague in the package. I set myself to work it over again from memory, and I found the way to express the harmony of the tones more strongly. Tell me, have you received those drawings of mine? I sent you half a dozen, once by parcel post and 10 or so later on. So I think another thing that, again, if you compare Van Gogh's resilience, his psychological resilience, to this kid in Pennsylvania, what is a big difference between the two? Wasn't Van Gogh isolated? Wasn't Van Gogh lonely? And I think the answer is yes, but he manages to break through that by writing regular letters to his brother. Also, he finds someone to be connected to. He is glued to someone, even though he is somewhat alone and lonely. And that is the same thing any person must do. Find someone or something like this, right, to be connected to. And so, at the very least, if Thomas Crooks was feeling miserable, maybe he could have gotten a puppy and he could have just focused a bit of his thinking on something else, right? On the well-being of something else, right? Might have made a difference. Okay, I'm just saying, Van Gogh is actually very isolated, is very lonely as well, but he manages to bridge that by having a very strong connection, even through letters, through lots of letters, with one person that listens to him, that cares about him, and that can be enough. That can be a very vital link in terms of your well-being, in terms of your sanity, in terms of continuity. Yeah, support system. Okay, so he goes on to say, the doctor here said to me about Monticelli that he always thought him an eccentric, but that as for madness, he had only been a little that way toward the end. Considering all the misery, so Monticelli is another artist, right? Is he an artist or is he a writer? I think he's an artist. Let's have a quick look at Monticelli. Adolphe Monticelli, French painter of the generation preceding the Impressionists. He died in 1886. So he died 3 years before Van Gogh went to the asylum. And that's him. And that's some of his art. Still life with sardines and sea urchins. A painted work on a house wall, 1875. Portrait de Madame Pascal. Well, I would personally say that Monticelli's portraits are much better than Van Gogh's, certainly far better executed. Look at that. Much, much better than Van Gogh can do the same thing. We've seen this before, or I've seen this before. Flowers in a blue vase. There's that. I'm just wondering whether he painted the thing about the angels and the what is that thing called? I just can't think of the term. Where the angels announce the birth of Christ to the shepherds. Is it the Annunciation? So anyway, these are Monticelli's, Seascape near Marseille. Anyway, so that's who he's referring to. So he says, considering all the misery of Monticelli's last years, is there any reason to be surprised that he gave way under too heavy a load? And has one any right to deduce from this that, artistically speaking, he fell short in his work? So what's quite interesting here is you have Van Gogh pontificating over another mad artist, pontificating over the misery of another artist, pontificating over this idea of an artist that's unable to bear his load, an artist that is kind of overburdened. And doesn't that give a sense that Van Gogh really is resilient, even when he's under this terrible burden himself? He nevertheless is able to deal with it quite with quite good psychology and with quite good balance, right? Anyway, he says, I do not believe it. He had such a power of logical calculation and originality as a painter that it is still regrettable that he hadn't the stamina to make its flowering more complete. And so one can ask that of Van Gogh, did he have the stamina for his art to become fully manifest? And I think what's really underestimated is Van Gogh's stamina. Then he says, I'm sending you enclosed a sketch of the cicadas here. he seems to be very aware of them. He says, their song in the great heat here is the same charm for me as the cricket on the heart, for the peasants at home. Old man, don't let's forget that the little emotions are the great captains of our lives, and that we obey them without knowing it. Look at those words. The little emotions are the great captains of our lives. So he's kind of saying, in a way, we don't realize it, but we are actually at the mercy of our moods. These little feelings that we have that drift in and out of ourselves have actually great sway, and we must be careful. He says, if it is still hard for me to take courage again in spite of faults committed. And so he's saying, basically, I'm struggling to believe in myself. I'm struggling a little bit with self-esteem. I'm struggling a little bit to have courage to face the world. I'm happy to hide away from the world right now. I'm actually struggling a bit with courage. What is a good title? What was a good title? It's still hard for me to take courage. This one. Don't let's forget that the little emotions are the great captains of our lives. Okay, I think I might just quickly change that right now. Is that what you meant? Is that what you meant, Yvonne? Just quickly change it here. Okay, done. Sorry about that. Okay. Good call, Yvonne. Good call. Okay, so he goes on to say, if it is still hard for me to take courage again in spite of faults committed, and to be committed, which must be my cure, don't forget henceforth that neither our spleen nor our melancholy, nor yet our feelings of good nature or common sense are our sole guides, and above all, not our final protection. And that if you too find yourself faced with heavy responsibilities to be risked, if not undertaken, honestly, don't let's be too much concerned about each other, since it so happens that the circumstances of living in a state so far removed from our youthful conceptions of an artist's life must make us brothers in spite of everything. So he basically says to his brother, you know what, don't let what's going on overwhelm you. I'm not going to let what's going on overwhelm me. What's going on must make us brothers in spite of everything. And so it's kind of a classic situation where difficulty is in a way bringing him closer to the people around him, even though he's far away from them. Difficulty, struggle, hardship is making him reach out to his brother and basically say, we are companions, we together in this situation. Things are so closely connected. So think about what we're talking about, that is not disconnected, is not unstuck, is not unglued, despite being lonely and alone, and in the situation he's in, he still feels closely connected. He says things are so closely connected that here you sometimes find cockroaches in the food, as if you were really in Paris. On the other hand, it may be that in Paris you sometimes catch a real feeling of the fields. It certainly is not much, but after all, it is reassuring. So can you see, even though he's in a place where there are cockroaches in the food, he's not sort of boo-hoo-hoo, feeling sorry for himself. He's just dealing with what he's dealing with his daily bread, right? Anyway, he goes on to say, so take your fatherhood as a good soul on our heaths, on our old heaths would take it, those heaths which through all the noise, tumult, how do you say it? Tumult. I need to look this up. I know about tumultuous. So if it's tumultuous, would you say tumult? Let's find out. What do you guys say?
Tumult.
Tumult. That sounds like a tumor.
Tumult.
Well, I guess you do say tumultuous. Okay. And that is a din, a loud noise, a racket, commotion, a ruckus, unrest, chaos, disturbance, disarray.
Tumult.
And that's the word that he's thinking about. And I mean, that in a way is what he's faced with in the asylum, all of this. But anyway, he talks about the fogginess of the cities still remain with us, inexpressibly dear, however timid our tenderness may be. That is to say, let this be your notion of fatherhood, exile and stranger and poor man that you are, and henceforth find strength. Like, can you believe it? You've got Vincent really providing support to his brother. You know, he's in the asylum and he's telling his brother, take heart, don't be overwhelmed by what you're facing. And then he says, sooner or later, such as it is, we meet our destinies. But certainly it would be a sort of hypocrisy if I were to forget all the good humor, the happy-go-lucky carelessness of the poor devils that we were, coming and going in this Paris that has become so strange, and to let it weigh us down out of proportion to our real load of cares. So, that's another way that you can rise above something like depression or being alone or whatever. What are you grateful for? What memories do you have that you hold dear? What are the good times? What good memories and good humor do you have from the past? What can you take from the past that made you something that made life worth living in a way? In other words, remember the good stuff. Then he says, indeed, I'm so glad that if there are sometimes cockroaches in the food here, it's the second time he says this. Hey, I think you must go and lie down. Okay? I think you must lie down. So he says the second time, he says, I'm so glad. And then he says, if there are sometimes cockroaches in the food here, well, you have your wife and child at home. It's quite a weird thing to say here. It's almost like he's saying, although things are horrible here in a sense, what gives me joy, hope, optimism, a sense of something positive is that you have your wife and child at home. Something is going on in the world that's good. Something's going on in the world that I'm happy about. Something's going on in the world that I can take heart in, right? Hey, Stephanie, good to see you here. Yeah, I mean, well said. Loud noises, cockroaches in the food. He is really resilient, right? Maria says some people help themselves emotionally by helping others. Don't you get that sense from Vincent that he is helping himself by focusing on his brother, right? Tumult. Okay, tumult. Okay, it's not a word I use very often, other than tumultuous. Besides, it is cheering that Voltaire, for instance, has left us at liberty not to believe absolutely everything we imagine. Voltaire is actually a really interesting French writer. Some of his quotes are really quite meaningful. Here are a couple. To the living we owe respect, but to the dead we owe only the truth. That is certainly a good aphorism for true crime. It is difficult to free fools from the chains they revere. That's certainly true. Every man is guilty of all the good he did not do. What a great saying. Common sense is not so common, for sure. Those who make you believe in absurdities can make you commit atrocities. All of them fantastic sayings, right? Fantastic. And so he says, Voltaire has left us at liberty not to believe absolutely everything we imagine. In other words, Voltaire says, hey, think critically, right? Look at this one. To the dead, we owe only the truth. So, yeah, he certainly is someone who seems to be about critical thinking. Thus, while sharing your wife's anxiety about your health, I'm not going so far as to believe what now and then for a moment I imagined, namely that worry on my account was the cause of your comparatively long silence. So he did have a little bit of concern. He thought, wow, I haven't heard from Theo. I'm a little bit worried Theo is having second thoughts about all this. I'm a little bit worried that Theo has changed his mind about me, that Theo's recalibrated and maybe I need to stop painting. And so he says, for a moment I imagined that your comparatively long silence was because you were worried about me. And then he says, that is so easily explained when one realizes how her condition must occupy your mind. Then he realizes, oh, it wasn't about me. You were in a situation yourself with Joe. You were married, your wife's pregnant, that's what's going on. He says, but it is quite all right, and it is the road that everyone must take in our world. Goodbye for now, and a good handshake for you and Joe. Ever yours, Vincent. Now, can you imagine? Then he says, in haste, but I wanted not to delay sending the letter for old Gorgan. You surely have the address. Like I say, we've never seen that letter. But can you imagine being in a situation where you're about to go into an asylum, you've been kicked out of a town, you've been kicked out of your home, and then the most important person in your life suddenly kind of goes silent? I think a lot of people would lose their shit. They would just go nuts. It's like, everyone has abandoned me. I don't know what is happening. I'm alone in the world, kind of thing. And even then, he seems to kind of hold it together. I can tell you when I was in Long Island and I had COVID, and I had some really lonely days, like in the hotel room. And I remember at one point I reached out to a friend of mine who I knew also had COVID, and told him that I had COVID, told him that I'd actually been coughing up blood, actually. And he didn't really respond. And I felt very discouraged by that. I felt quite insulted by that. I felt quite hurt by that. I don't know whether he thought I was saying hypothetically I'm coughing blood, or whether, because I said something like, did you ever cough blood? I can't remember if I said explicitly that I was, but I remember feeling extremely lonely in the sense that in an indirect way I'd reached out to this friend of mine, and he basically didn't follow up, didn't say, how are you? How are you now? How are you doing? Just nothing. And I guess I felt a little bit sorry for myself that I wasn't hearing from him. I'm just saying, you can kind of understand Van Gogh having similar feelings of self-pity, of even blaming his brother, like, wow, can't you see I'm in this terrible situation? And, I needed a little bit of support, and you just abandoned me. And yet he didn't go down that route. He kind of held things together. You know what I'm saying? So again, it just shows you what a tough psyche he actually has. And It's not that tough that he can't mention it in a letter where he said, wow, when you were silent for a while, I did think a couple of things. So it's not like he bottles everything up either, right? Joe, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Better late than never. Okay, so let's go on to the next letter. We are now into, this was a nice picture, wasn't it? We're now into the 9th of July. And this is a letter from Vincent to Theo, I think asking for paint. So he says the following. My dear Theo, tomorrow I shall send a small roll of canvases by Goodstrain. There are 4, namely the following. View of all. Okay. Ivy. Okay, it's obviously in color. Lilacs. Not terribly wonderful. Red chestnuts in the Jardin des Plantes in all. That's quite nice. Let's see if we can get the original of this one. A better kind of quality of not really seeing anything that's much better. There is this, which is not a lot better, but it's not too bad. Okay. Anyway, so he says, which will go with the ones you already have, such as the red and green vineyard, the garden and the harvest, and the starry sky. So this is not Starry Night, but this was definitely a painting that sort of it was a painting that was sort of angling at Starry Night, right? What do you guys say? Wouldn't you say of all the paintings that Van Gogh painted, this is the most Starry Night, non-Starry Night that he ever painted? It's the closest to Starry Night that's not Starry Night. Do you agree with that? Again, let's see if we can get a better example of this. By the way, I've taken a photo of this scene. This is a scene very close to his home. The yellow house would be behind him. This is actually all over here. And so you walk all along here, and then there's sort of street lights all over here. There still are to this day. Let's just see if we can get a better version of that. I don't know if this is maybe a bit better. Right? And it's kind of like Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, isn't it? If anything, Starry Night is more vigorous, more potent in a way. More colorful as well, right? Yeah, I think it would just be a little bit difficult to find that like right now. I don't know if I'd be able to find it very easily, but let's see if I can find something similar. Let's just see. So this is the real thing. I saw it a moment ago. It's not that one. Oh, yeah, it is. Are you guys ready to be wowed? You want to see the real thing? I just need that to do that. So can you see there's kind of a curve over here, and there's a kind of a, can you see that sort of building over there? And so it goes on, right? Okay, so this is what it looks like in reality, in a way. You see these little lines here, yellow lines, right? This is what it looks like in reality, right? That and that. You can see there's a little bit of a jetty over here, some boats over there. So he may have painted it closer to this point over here. So this is these are some other images from all. Do you recognize that? That's all. And this is something I don't think he really ever painted, but that's also in all. The Colosseum. He may have painted the inside of it. Here is the hospital where he first went to when he lost his ear. And I think I've got one other thing. Okay, so there's also this website, the ultimate guide to the Van Gogh trail in Provence and Paris. So there's the painting, there's the real place, what it looks like today, right? And then that's what it looks like in all. Must have starting to make me feel like I really want to go there again. Just some photos from this particular website. I'll put a link to that in chat. That's the station. I think I've actually walked through those doors. I think I've taken a similar photo to that one as well. Right? Some pretty old history. So that's that again, but now you see just a kind of a different view of it. It's not quite the same angle. By the way, the yellow house is sort of in this area. This is like a reverse angle. So where you saw that, now it's being taken from kind of over here across like that. Sorry. So this is now basically over here. The yellow house is sort of over here. It could actually be over there. This is right by the yellow house. The yellow house used to be here. It's just not there anymore. The yellow house used to be there. I've taken a photo also around about here. So it's quite amazing when you see things like this. You remember all of this is real. All of this really happened. These places still exist today. You can go to them right now. There it is. There it is. This is not just like a story. This really happened. Right? Anyway, if you guys are interested in this particular site, I'll just put that in chat if you guys want to look at it a little bit later on. Okay, so maybe it was worth checking this out in a bit more detail. What do you guys say? Okay, so he sends to Theo Starry Sky, and he sends the garden, the harvest, and then I think he also sends this, which Theo ultimately sells for his brother, the Red Vineyard. I think he sells it to a Belgian lady. So he says, I'm putting them with some more studies which are dry, which are more studies from nature than subjects for pictures. And it is always like that. You must make several before you can get a whole that is character, right? You must make several. You must do this over and over again before you make something that's worthwhile. And then he says, now for the subjects of these 7 studies, irises. I must say that is a beautiful. That's one of his best pictures, I think. And then peach trees in bloom. Okay, I don't think that's terribly good. Well, not the version that you get here. Thanks a lot, Yvonne. Appreciate it. Let's just go to another source for that one. I think we can maybe look at this one. Can we make it bigger? Well, let me just show you what I'm looking at. It definitely does look better than that version, right? What happens if I do this? So you can actually see this is really a beautiful picture. This is really a beautiful picture. So colorful. Look at the color in this road. Definitely one of his better works, right? Do you agree that this is far better than that? That's why we need to go away from these scans. Okay. And then meadows, we can't see that. Then there's olives. That's also one of his. I think I've actually photographed that actual picture. And then there is old willows, also quite nice, pollard willows. And then there is orchard in bloom. Okay. And so he says, now the next package, which will follow in a little while, will be made up mostly of the wheat fields and olive gardens. As you see, I've been to Arles to get these canvases. The attendant here accompanied me. We went to Monsieur Saul's house, but he had gone on vacation for 2 months. Wow, that's nice. 2-month vacation. And then to the hospital to see Monsieur Ray, whom I did not find either. Then we spent the day with my former neighbors, such as my old charwoman and some others. I'm sure he was with some other woman as well. You get very fond of people who have seen you ill, and it has done me a world of good to see again some people who were kind and gentle with me then. Someone told me that Monsieur Ray had passed an examination, had been to Paris, but the porter at the hospital said he did not know anything about it. I'm curious to know if you have seen him, for he had intended to go and see the exhibition and to pay you a visit then. The doctor here may not be going to Paris. He suffers a good deal from his gout. I've received the second package of canvases and paints, and I thank you very much for them. Malstillis says, to me, it looks like he used a different technique to create the clouds. Okay, so he goes on to say, the last canvas I've done is a view of the mountains with a dark hut at the bottom among some olive trees. There's the hut. Mountains at Saint-Remy with dark hut. Not quite seeing that. Okay, well, it's definitely got a different. Okay, so this is it. I wonder, I think I've actually seen this picture in the Guggenheim Museum in New York. And I mean, it looks so different here, I don't actually recognize it. But this is what it actually looks like. Are you ready to see what it actually looks like? Ready? This is what it actually looks like. A lot better, right? There's the hut. These mountains look like clouds in a way. Look how delicate these flowers are. You know, this little delicate touch. The house is sort of ensconced in trees and the mountains, but then there's this little delicate touch of flowers here. Quite pretty, right? So let's just quickly have a look at the history of this painting, and that we go to the Guggenheim website, right? So that's where we see this. During the years preceding his death in 1890, Vincent van Gogh suffered increasingly frequent attacks of mental distress, the cause of which remains unclear. Mountains at Saint-Remy was painted in July 1889. That's where we are right now. When Van Gogh was recovering from just such an episode at the hospital of Saint Paul de Mouzol in the southern French town of Saint-Remy. The painting represents the Alpilles, a low range of mountains. Well, I can tell you they're not that low, visible from the hospital grounds. In it, Van Gogh activated the terrain and sky with the heavy impasto and bold broad strokes characteristic of his late work. Right? So is he speaking a bit of his mental state when he paints this? Van Gogh advocated painting from nature rather than inventing a motif from the imagination. On a personal level, he felt that painting outdoors would help to restore his health, a sentiment he often voiced when writing to his brother. Well, we've just heard that sentiment. Is saying, go outdoors, paint outdoors, be in nature. Being in nature will restore your health. And it is expressing that sentiment not only in terms of his own health, but also Theo's health. He mentioned this painting several times in his letters. In one, he wrote, "I rather like the entrance to a quarry. I was doing it when I felt this attack coming on." It's quite interesting. I was doing this painting when I felt this feeling coming upon me, because to my mind, the somber greens go well with the ochre tone. So he is trying to communicate something through color here. In these colors, he's actually trying to share what is going on in his heart and in his mind just through these colors. The way these colors are mixing and broiling with one another. And if you think about it, for a hillside, this does look pretty tumultuous, doesn't it? I mean, this is just supposed to be mountains, but these mountains look like they're frothing. And that is, in a way, him. I mean, if you look at that, that almost looks like a figure over there. They almost look like there are faces in this mountain. That looks like someone's hands and feet. Someone looks like eyes, right? And so he seems to be communicating something of this almost looks like a person over here. The weird things that are going on in his brain, right? And by painting, maybe it actually gives him a sense of proportion and distance. That something happens, he paints it, and then it's over, right? So quite interesting, right? Then he goes on to say, nature had a quasi-religious or transcendental significance for Van Gogh. Unlike the early Impressionists who often painted urban life, the artist felt that the city, in particular Paris, was a place of iniquity, inherently unhealthful. In the face of industrialization and modernization, yes, the Eiffel Tower was built the same year. Van Gogh longed nostalgically for a rural environment peopled with good-natured, God-fearing peasants, such as those painted by Jean-Francois Millet, one of his heroes. It's pretty well written, this. This utopian ideal, based on a belief in the regenerative capacity of a primitive culture was shared by Van Gogh's friend Paul Gauguin, certainly, who sought redemption further from home among the people of Tahiti. It's quite well written, this, right? And that's all to do with this particular painting. I think I've actually seen the real thing in the Guggenheim. Okay, again, maybe it's worth sometimes, going to the trouble to look at the real thing. Then he says, I expect you will be greatly absorbed by the thought of the child who is to come. I'm very glad it is so. I dare think that in time you will find a good deal of inner tranquility that way. The fact that in Paris, again, it's quite incredible that Van Gogh is giving so much advice to his brother for his brother's like mental health. It's actually unreal. It's like all that he can think about is his brother's state of mind. He says the fact that in Paris you take on, as it were, second nature, which over and above the preoccupation of business and art makes you less strong than the peasants. That fact does not prevent you from linking yourself through the bonds of a wife and child with a simpler and truer nature, the ideal of which keeps haunting us. What a business, that Secretan sale. Well, that's actually quite amazing. There's this belief that a kid called René Secretan actually shot Van Gogh. Some people believe that. I don't believe it. But yeah, you actually have him referring to a Secretan sale. I don't think it's related though, but it's certainly the same name. I'm always pleased that the Malays hold their own, but I should very much like to see more good reproductions of Malays so as to reach the people. Now, you've just heard in the Guggenheim thing that he held Malay in such high regard, that Malay was one of his heroes. His work is sublime, especially considered as a whole, and it will become more and more difficult to get an idea of it when the pictures are dispersed. I'm sorry not to be able to put the wheat field with the reaper into the package. Write me a line soon, a handshake for you and Joe. Ever yours, Vincent. Okay. And now we go to the 16th of July. A week goes by, and then we get a letter from Theo. My dear Vincent, I've been absolutely unable to write to you sooner, for the heat has been overwhelming, and I felt so weak that everything made me feel extremely tired. Now I've almost recovered from it for good, I hope. I thank you for your letters and fine drawings you sent me. The hospital at All is very remarkable, and the butterfly and the branch of the eglantine are very beautiful too. Simple in color and very beautifully drawn. The last drawings give the impression of having been made in a fury and are a bit removed from nature. I shall understand them better when I've seen one of these subjects in painting. I have invited quite a number of people to see your pictures. The Pissarros, Father Tanguy, Verenskiold, a Norwegian who has a lot of talent and who got the Medal of Honor in his country's section of the Universal Exhibition at Mauser's. I think we've actually gone through this letter before. We were just looking for a reply from Theo. Anyway, he says here, the latter is the secretary of the XX at Brussels. I don't know if XX is supposed to be 100 or 20, or I don't know what that really represents. The king, I don't know. He came to ask me whether you would be willing to send in work for their next exhibition. Wow, good news. There's plenty of time for it, but he didn't know whether he could come to Paris before the event. I told him that I did not suppose you would have any objections. He ought to invite Bernard too. In general, people like the night effect and the sunflowers. I put one of these sunflower pieces in our dining room against the mantelpiece. It has the effect of a piece of cloth with satin and gold embroidery. It is magnificent. Not bad praise from his brother, right? As from the 15th onward, I no longer have the apartment in the Rue Lepic at my disposal, and as it is impossible to store all the canvases at home, I've rented a little room in Father Tanguy's house. I actually don't think we have gone through this letter, where I've put quite a few of them. I've chosen those which are to be taken from the stretchers, and then other canvases can be put on them. Father Tangui has been very helpful, and it will be easy to let him have new things all the time, which he will be able to show. You can well imagine how enthusiastic he is about the things with expressive colors like the vines, the night effect, etc. I wish you could hear him, if only once. I also forgot to tell you that Dahan has been here. He sent Joe an enormous bunch of poppies of all sorts of colors. I never saw such a glorious bouquet and the rain of multicolored petals when they began to wither. Well, there's a little detail from the inside of the house, this big bouquet of poppies, and then they slowly withered and the petals fell down, and left something of I guess, a pile of petals. He likes what you do very much. He's now with Gauguin. Isaacson is all at sea now that Dahan is no longer here. And then some news of Gauguin. Gauguin is writing for a paper which I'm sending you. He wrote me a letter last week and asked me to let him have your address as he had lost it. Well, even though he got his address, he still didn't write to him, as far as we know. Dahan told me that Gauguin has done very fine things. You were not very fortunate in not seeing. You were not very fortunate. You were not lucky in not seeing Mr. Sauls or Ray when you were in Hull. I had a letter from the former gentleman before I received our letter in which he told me to send him the Wanderers to Emmaus. I sent him Angelus, a lithograph by Vernier. I'm sorry I did not think of the other subject, for it would have been rather more to his taste. You can well imagine that the news of Joe's pregnancy excited her parents greatly. Her father and mother are coming here next week. Our mother, too, is very pleased. And now he responds to his brother's letter. He says, what you say is very true, that her letter is very remarkable for her age. Now he's talking about their mother's letter, that their mother is just seeming to be a lot younger. She seems to be growing younger. Yes, it is certainly a very good thing that I'm married, for if this had not been the case, I think I should have been a very sick man at present. Whereas now I believe I'm getting my strength back and I will be able to work a little better than I have. So how is he getting his strength back? Well, Joe is looking after him. Joe is cooking for him. Joe is making sure he gets enough rest. Joe is, giving him support. And there he says it. Joe is very good to me, and yet she has had her very bad days in consequence of vomiting, etc. Now she seems to be calming down and she's looking well. If only the child is viable. So they're worrying that although she's pregnant, is this child going to be viable? Is she going to be able to carry it full term? It doesn't seem very good at this point. I think that in general, children inherit the parents' kind of constitution rather than the state of their health at the moment of begetting. I have to close this letter in a hurry. Enclosed is a money order, for since you did not see Mr. Sauls, it is possible that you need something. Best wishes also from Joe, and once again, many thanks for your kind letters and the drawings. Yours, Theo. Okay. So this letter took about a week for him to write in response. And I'm going to assume that Vincent writes the same day or the next day. Wow, that's quite a gap. Look at that. 16 July, and then so a week has already gone by, and then Vincent doesn't respond, I guess, and Theo writes again almost 2 weeks later, which is in terms of chronology, 5 days ahead of where we are now in terms of July. And so he says, my dear Vincent, I'm a little uneasy that you have not received my letter, which contained a money order for 100 francs. You usually reply as soon as you receive it. If this were not so, I should say that you have had no time for it. I reproach myself with writing you so seldom, but letter writing is extremely difficult for me lately. I don't know what the reason for it is. I received your last consignment, which is in perfect condition, and which I think extremely beautiful. So he's giving his brother, again, some compliments and so on. Are these the things you set aside expressly in order to let them dry? For in most of these canvases, I find more clarity of expression and such a fine general effect. The one with the underbrush and the trees overgrown with ivy, the promenade at all, right? The fields with the gardens in spring are very beautiful, right? This one. These and others too are now mounted on stretchers from which we removed the canvases which were on them and which are now at Tangui's. They make a very fine showing in the frames. As for Tanguy himself, he likes them very much too. In my opinion, you chose such fine subjects for your pictures. Those trees with their dense foliage full of freshness and bathed in sunlight are marvelously good. Do you think Theo is just trying to butter up his brother? Do you think Theo is trying to sort of flatter him? Do you think Theo is being disingenuous when he talks about? No, I don't think there are letters missing. It's just that for. What do you think the reason is that Van Gogh hasn't written back? Do you think he's holding a grudge? Do you think he's spiteful? Do you think his health has taken a bad turn? What do you think it could be? No, he absolutely did paint outside in Orvez. He did. He painted Wheatfield with crows outside in Orvez. He painted many paintings. The church, the Catholic Church, many paintings. So we're going to see in a moment why he didn't write back. Anyway, so Theo goes on to say, I should be very pleased if you lived in an environment which was wholly to your taste, and if you were surrounded by people you liked and who returned your friendship, for you cannot work better than you are doing now. He's basically saying it's incredible that you are churning out this quality of work given where you are, and it absolutely is. It's incredible that he produces this, right? When he's in the asylum. It's incredible. It's not like, excuse me, I need things to be right for me. I need that over there, that over there. Can you please be quiet? Despite it being chaotic and despite things being far from ideal, he produces this incredible art, right? He says, what a number of fine things you have turned out. And he still hasn't seen Starry Night, but of course, when he does see it, he's not going to be too complimentary. He says, it is fortunate that your health is good. Mr. Peyron wrote the other day to tell me that he thought your condition satisfactory, so not really good or bad, just okay. Let us hope this will get better and better. Joe's parents are here at the moment. Her mother is staying with us, her father with Andre. So Andre is Joe's brother, Theo's brother-in-law. It is a nice distraction, especially for Joe, and it forces her to take exercise, which seems to be necessary. She's looking well, only she is a little weak. So at the same time that Vincent has his problems, you actually also have Theo and Joe having kind of health issues as well. A lot of people don't really remember that or realize that. Then he says, look at these words. As for me, I look like a corpse. But I went to see Reve, who gave me all sorts of drugs, which at least do me enough good to put a stop to my cough. So he's coughing, which was killing me. I think it is over now. It is the change of life. And in consequence of the way I'm being taken care of now, I am going to regain my strength as soon as the evil is past. Yesterday we went to Saint-Germain. Oh, how beautiful the countryside is. Why do people go and wear themselves out in cities when they might breathe wholesome air, which brings life back? Do you leave the establishment once in a while now? Write me a letter if you can. Just tell me how you are. Don't work too much. A cordial handshake also from Joe, yours, Theo. Okay, so the question is, what's the response to this letter? When is that going to happen? Can you feel the tension? Let's have a look. 29th of July. Let's have a look. 4th of August. Another letter from Theo. So it's now almost a month later. Well, look at what we're talking about. Vincent's last letter was the 9th of July. It's now the 4th of August, and he's still writing, and Vincent hasn't responded. So he says, Dear Vincent, I thought it so strange not to get a letter from you that I telegraphed in order to learn if you were well. So this is kind of a crisis. This is kind of one of the most serious situations between the two, one of the longest periods of time where Vincent is silent. And so he says, Dr. Peyron answered me in a letter that you have been ill for a day or two, but that you are already recovering a bit. So obviously his health is starting to deteriorate. It's not like he's just in the asylum and he's just going to bide his time. He's going down a bit of a downward spiral. Poor fellow, how dearly I should like to know what to do to put a stop to this nightmare. When your letter did not come to hand, I had an idea, I don't know why, that you were traveling to us and that you would come and give us a surprise. If you should ever think it might do you good to be among people who would be glad to do their utmost to give you some stimulus and who would love to have you with them, please remember our little guest room. Isn't that a wonderful gesture from Theo? Just saying, I'm not feeling very well. Joe's not feeling very well. Her parents are here, but you are more than welcome. If you're not happy, come here, come and stay in our guest room. You are more than welcome. He says, we would love to have you. Isn't that a wonderful gesture? He says, it was inaugurated the other day by Joe's mother, so it has proved itself habitable. I hope that this indisposition is nothing but an after effect of the last crisis. But if you ascribe this relapse to something special, do inform me of it in any case. Are the doctor and the rest of the staff good to you? So again, you're getting real, sincere, heartfelt concern from Theo, despite what Theo's got to deal with where he is. Hey, come on, come. Do they make any distinction between the various patients, or does this depend on what they pay? If one is uneasy in one's mind, one is apt to see things in a different and worse light. It's kind of saying, maybe it's all in your mind what's going on. Maybe you should worry less or something like that. Come to me. Come on. Hey, come. Okay. He says, I do not think I worry more than necessary, but I hope nevertheless that you will tell me everything. So is definitely is worrying, is trying not to worry too much. All is well with us, and I feel a lot better than I did some time ago. My cough is entirely gone now, thanks to Reve's remedies. In your last letter, you wrote me that we were brothers for more than one reason. This is what I feel too. And though my heart is not as sensitive as yours, I can enter at times into your feeling of being smothered by so many thoughts that cannot be resolved. It's quite an interesting comment there. I can enter at times into your feeling of being smothered by so many thoughts that cannot be resolved. Never lose courage and remember how much I want you. Joe Cordley wishes you a speedy recovery. I hope you will be able to give good news about yourself soon. Yours, Theo. Okay, it's now the 4th of August. 16th of August. Wow, still no response from Theo, from Vincent to Theo. It's now basically a month and about a week. It's about 5 weeks at least since Vincent has written to him. But Vincent has written to Cor. So he says, we received your letter for Cor and handed it to him this morning, for he arrived here very early at 6 o'clock. We are so overjoyed that he was able to travel to Southampton by way of Paris. So Cor is on his way to South Africa, right? One of the Van Gogh brothers is headed to South Africa, and is going from the Netherlands to Southampton in Britain, and from there he's going to sail to Cape Town, which is where I was a week ago. You're going to see some pictures of Cape Town in a minute. In all probability, he will be gone for a long time, and Theo especially would have been extremely sorry. So this must have been written by Joe, right? Theo especially would have been extremely sorry. I think this letter is written by Joe. If he had not been able to see him once more. This very morning, we started showing him the town from the Place de l'Étoile, am I pronouncing it right, to the Place de la Bastille, and he was quite enraptured. Theo was just a little bit disappointed that there was not a single little word to him. Do write him soon. So it's kind of Theo is basically saying, wow, I've written to my brother, he's not writing back. So now Joe is trying to, I won't say guilt him, but certainly trying to prod him to do something. If only one tiny word. We are so anxious to hear from you personally about how you are. And we hope from the bottom of our hearts that you'll be feeling better soon. You have no idea how often you are thought of and spoken of. Mother too wrote that she was longing for a letter from you. I'm sure that's his mother. Do you know what Cor brought with him from her this morning? A pair of the sweetest little socks for our little boy. For I persist in believing that it will be a little boy, however much you may laugh at me. So she's still got a bit of humor there. If possible, do write a little word to Theo soon. He's so anxious for it. A cordial handshake in thought. Lovingly yours, Joe. Fortunately, Theo is quite well again. So what do you think? Do you think this is going to lead to Vincent writing a letter? Do you think this letter from Joe is going to do the trick? What do you guys say? So this was written on the 16th of August. Let's have a look. 22nd of August. So it took about a week for Vincent to eventually write back. Almost a month and a half have gone by since he last wrote. And so he says, my dear Theo, I thank Joe very much for having written and know that you want me to drop you a line. I must let you know it is very difficult for me to write. My head is so deranged. So there you have his explanation. You're basically saying, I'm out of sorts. I can't think properly. I'm struggling to concentrate, right? So I'm taking advantage of an interval. Dr. Peyron is very kind to me and very patient. You can imagine that. And so there he says, I'm terribly distressed because the attacks have come back when I was already beginning to hope they would not return. Now, one thing that I noticed when I dealt with this part, because I think I did deal with it in my book, was Vincent had just gone to Arles, right? He went to Arles, he saw his neighbors, he saw the charwoman, and I wouldn't be surprised if he had some experience there, maybe went to a brothel, maybe drank a little bit or whatever. And that is partly what set him back. He was on the road to recovery, but then he did something possibly in Arles. It could just be the syphilis manifesting anyway, but I do think every time he went to Arles, maybe he got up to a little bit of mischief, right? Then he says it would be a good thing if you perhaps wrote a word to Dr. Peyron to tell him that working on my pictures is almost a necessity for my recovery. So I don't know whether Dr. Peyron has basically said, stop painting, it's driving you mad, stop painting. You almost get the sense that Vincent is saying, I really need to paint in order to stay sane, right? Right? That's what he writes in the second paragraph. Please speak to Dr. Peyron. Tell him that working on my pictures is necessary for my recovery. For these days, without anything to do, without being able to go to the room they've allotted me to do my painting in, are almost intolerable. So I think he's not been allowed to go to the room where he's supposed to paint. And so that has made things very hard for him. Friend Roulard has written me too. I've received a catalogue of the Gauguin, Bernard, Schufferneck, etc. exhibition, which I find interesting. G has also written a kind letter. So we've not ever seen the letter he wrote to Gauguin, and we've never seen Gauguin's reply. He says that Gauguin replied to him. He says, a little vague and obscure, but after all, I must say that I think they are right to have an exhibition among themselves. So a little bit of intrigue there. For many days, I've been absolutely wandering, as in awe, just as much, if not worse, and presumably the attacks will come back again in the future. It is abominable. So I must say we haven't seen Van Gogh this distraught, distressed, this. I mean, look how optimistic he was in his previous letters. Now he's quite pessimistic. He doesn't have a very good prognosis for himself, right? For 4 days, I was unable to eat because of a swollen throat. I hope it is not complaining too much to tell you these details, but I do it to prove that I'm not yet in a condition to go to Paris or to Pont-Aven unless it were to Charenton. It seems that I gather dirt and eat it, although my memory of these bad moments are vague. So apparently that's what he's been doing, eating dirt. And it seems to me there's something shady in it. For this reason, I don't know what it will mean for my painting. I no longer see any possibility of having courage or hope, but after all, it wasn't just yesterday that we found this job of ours wasn't a cheerful one. So yeah, he seems extremely low. Do you agree? He seems very despondent. He seems very hopeless. He seems to be in some distress. As Stephanie says, he's suffering. Then he says, all the same, I'm pleased that you have got the package from here, the landscapes. Thank you especially for this etching from Rembrandt, etching after Rembrandt. It is amazing, and yet it reminds me once more of the man with the staff in the Lacaze gallery. If you want to give me very, very great pleasure, then send a copy to Gauguin. Further, the brochure of Rodin and Claude Monet is very interesting. This new attack, my dear brother, took me in the fields on a windy day when I was painting. I will send you the canvas, which I nevertheless finished. Entrance to the quarry. Okay, it's not particularly awesome. So he said he had an attack in the fields on a windy day when he was painting. So he was outside and something happened to him. Maybe he lost consciousness. And truly, it was a more sober attempt, matte in color without showing it, in broken greens and reds and rusty ochre. Just as I told you that sometimes I felt a great desire to begin again with a palette as of the north. I'll send you this canvas as soon as I can. So if we use a bit of true crime analysis here, we think about context, we think about what we know. Doesn't it make sense that because Van Gogh was, when he was painting, he had an attack, that Dr. Peyron said, that's it, no more painting for you, no more going outside for you, no more going into your painting room for you. You had an attack when you were painting, so we're going to try you not painting and see if that helps. Don't you think that's likely the way the doctor responded? And it wasn't very good for Van Gogh. It was like, wow, now I'm really stuck. Now I'm really in trouble. Do you guys agree? Yeah, he did suffer from something like seizures, something like epilepsy. I'm not sure if it was epilepsy, but it was something similar to that. And so he says, Good days. Thank you for all your kindness. A good handshake to you and Joe, and naturally to Cor if he's still there, Vincent. Then written in the margins, Mother and Will also wrote me a very nice letter. While I have no extravagant liking for Rod's book, all the same, I've made a canvas of the passage where he speaks of the mountains and the dark huts. Okay. Okay, well, I think we're going to stop there. The next letter is from Vincent. Wow, all the 3rd or 4th of September. So another 2 weeks or so go by. So we'll deal with that in Van Gogh letters 80, is it 87? So what I'm going to try and share with you guys is, let's see if I can find it. I really hope this plays. I really hope this plays. We're going to try and share a GoPro video that I recorded. I've got a feeling it's not going to allow it. It's wanting me to purchase a codec. If I can. Okay, let's just have a look. Just give me a second, guys. I'm going to try purchasing the codec and then see what happens after that. I don't see the purchase thing. Okay, send code. Yeah. Okay. Okay, well, that's not working. That's too bad. I can't seem to play it on this computer. Okay, well, I guess I'll just have to show you guys these pictures then. What's the problem here? Thanks so much, Bruni. Very generous. Wow. Thank you very much. I think I'm going to have to do this like this. Okay. Unfortunately, this is very clumsy. So let's have a look here. So there is one of the pictures of Timmy on the open road. Can you guys see that? There you go. Thanks a lot, Deborah. This is another one. Kind of like a hero image, right? Look at his eye there. Cheeky little face. This is us in Cape Town. Thought I actually had more to use here, but can see it was quite stormy. Look at Table Mountain in the background. So this was where Core sailed to from Southampton. Quite a stormy destination. This is Table Mountain. This is all a mountain over here, covered in cloud. And this is us just sort of heading over the rocks a little bit. There's another picture. I don't know why it's taking so long. I'm not really sure what's going on. Yeah, for some reason, it's not really letting me download any of these pictures, and I can't just show them to you. It's basically these images, but I can't, for some reason, I can't show them to you. I think what I'm going to do is go to this shortcut over here. Let's just put myself back on. I'm going to go to this shortcut over here and show you these pictures from are they New York? Okay, can you guys see this? Okay, so this is, I think it's the Museum of Modern Art. I'm not quite sure. So have a look at that. The cypress is so characteristic of the landscape of Provence. Until now, I've not been able to do them as I feel it. However, before leaving here, I'm planning to return to the fray to attack the cypresses. And that's what he writes in February 1890. So a couple of months down the line, remember we're now in August, September 1889. For a couple of months later, he's still going to be sort of obsessed with the cypresses. This is again just from the museum. The most eye-catching and storied fixture of the provincial countryside immediately struck a chord with the Dutch artist. He was quick to express the need to lay claim to the cypresses and to reserve a place for them in his repertoire. The robust, long-living evergreens not only carried age-old associations with death, rebirth, and immortality, but also had presided over the region for millennia, standing guard in their revered role as protectors of a landscape impacted by the notoriously fierce northerly mistral winds. So what did he admire about these trees? Their resilience. Few motifs were more emblematic of the south of France or resonated more strongly with his profound appreciation for the enduring and consoling aspects of nature. So that's something else he's trying to communicate is consolation. Did you guys ever listen to that song? I think it's called the Stable Story, Stable Song or something like that. So that is from one of his letters. So that's a picture of the actual letter in the museum. There's a drawing, and he has written the colors that he wants to use, right? And then there's some of his actual handwriting. It's pretty neat, isn't it? There's a reference to Bernard. See if you can recognize anything else. But quite neat penmanship, wouldn't you say? Not sure why some of these pictures aren't loading. Anyway, there is Drawbridge, painted in May 1888. And I don't really see any signature here, but there it is. By the way, this drawbridge doesn't exist anymore. There is a drawbridge near All, but it's not this one. It's not the original. Orchard with peach trees, wheat field, July 1888. Garden at all. That's the kind of way it's represented in the gallery. You can see this lady is looking at some letters. And you can see when you don't see the picture on a website, it actually looks quite beautiful in a frame the way it's meant to be seen, right? See, it says there are no photographs, and obviously I took a photo. I don't know why it's doing this, kind of weird. So quite a lot of interest in Van Gogh. Any pictures you recognize? That's sketched by Gauguin. I'm not crazy about it. So that's another letter that's in the museum. Looks like Paul Gauguin, doesn't it? Must say that's suddenly he's using the potato eater's palette here. This was painted in 1890, so this is very unusual that he's suddenly gone back to mucus and excrement colored colors, right? Dirt. The landscape with the cypresses, that wouldn't be easy. It requires a certain dose of inspiration to do beautiful things. This is something he painted in May 1890. Still painting cypresses. There's a little sense of the Starry Night idea. Look at that growing over there and that over there. A little bit of a semblance of Starry Night in this picture as well. Okay, I'm really sorry that I can't show you guys the GoPro. It's a really beautiful footage of, so that is a picture of the asylum window. And just think about how far his art has come from this place where he was alone to a building in New York, right? There the cypresses again. This was October 1889.
I went on your YouTube. I'm kind of new to YouTube. Listening to my voice also.
Okay. I don't know if I can show you any more. Let's see what I've got here. Okay, I think before I move on, I should probably show you guys this. Have a look at this. What do you think we are looking at here? Stephanie, are you leaving? Stephanie, I'm going to show a picture of you in a moment. Stephanie, don't leave just yet. So that's what we were looking at there. This was painted June 1889. Right? And there is Starry Night. I just thought I'd give you guys a bit of a sense of the actual art when you sort of facing it, right? That's cheesy. Very, very cheesy. Okay. Right. Okay. So I think I'm gonna just go out to a different file, and then I'll just share some of these. Some of these are Monet. It just gives you a sense of what is going on. Monet was a contemporary, of course, of Van Gogh. So let's have a look at this. Totally different style, right? Look at that. Pretty Monet definitely didn't have a problem in terms of ordering canvas sizes and paint. If Van Gogh was limited in terms of his budget, Monet definitely wasn't. Matisse.
My brother likes this artist.
Picasso. And there's Starry Night in the distance there. You recognize that picture? And that's the postman. You can't quite see him over there, but that's the postman over there. Quite popular, right? Can you see the paint doesn't quite cover the painting? You see that? Now, I'm sure you've never seen Story Night quite like this, have you? So even over here, you can see the canvas. And there is Stephanie and John. We visited this together. We were actually told, I think they thought we were quite suspicious. John was told, and I was also told, to put my backpack over my chest. Kind of strange. Anyone know who that is? I think it's Senior. Okay. That's all, folks. Okay. Hope you guys found that interesting. Just a little bit of a wandering down memory lane. I'm sorry that I couldn't show you the GoPro footage. It really is quite spectacular. I seem to need a codec or something, and it's just not, for some reason, it's just not showing. So sorry about that. I just want to thank everyone for joining me here. We'll be back with Van Gogh Letters 87 with those letters in September 1889 in the next episode. Thanks very much for the super chats. Really appreciate it. I think it was Signac. I'm not quite sure. I'm not actually 100% sure. But yeah, I've got quite a few. I've got a lot more photos of art galleries, including of the Guggenheim and so on, to share with you guys. So I'll also share those with you at some point. I'll try and find some way to show the GoPro footage, I mean, it shouldn't be that hard. If I can just download a VLC player on this computer, it should work. It did work on the other computer. So we'll try the next time I'll try and show you that. Okay, well, again, thanks for joining me. I hope you guys have a good night. I'm sure you'll agree with me. This was quite a poignant episode, but all of these dealing with this time of his life are quite, I don't know, it's got quite a deep element to it, doesn't it? So anyway, again, thanks for joining me. Chelsea, thanks a lot for being here throughout. Again, thanks very much for the super chats, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.